Judge Aaron Satie's judgments were required reading at Starfleet Academy. Captain Picard's favorite spot to study was under an elm tree near the parade grounds. And Ensign Kellogg is back. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 4, Episode 21, The Drumhead. Yep, The Drumhead. People know it well. Written by Jerry Taylor, the one and only, rest in peace. Directed by another one and only, Jonathan Frakes. This was April 27th, 1991. Where were you? How you doing today, Sirach?
I'm doing very well.
It looks like they took 3 weeks off. I think the last one was maybe April 7th or maybe 2 weeks off. There's April 6th, something like that. This is your first time seeing this episode, that's for sure. I hadn't seen this one in quite some time, but it's definitely an episode in which I thought of you for reasons I'll disclose later. What'd you think of it?
I think this was a really good episode. It was a a mystery, like a solving a mystery type of thing, which is a lot of the Star Trek episodes. It's solving some type of mystery, whether it's an alien or it's an algorithm, a virus, whatever it is. It's usually some type of mystery that has to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
So this one dealt with a kind of, the subject matter of distrust. Kind of gave me some Eddington vibes,
Yes, good, cool.
I got a little bit of that. Of course, that brings into play the Maquis and kind of a surreptitious group that is operating under the shadows and whatnot. And so this kind of gave me that kind of vibe. But I thought right off the bat, it was going to be a good episode, well written, and I think it delivered on that end.
Yeah, so it was interesting because since I hadn't seen it in decades, I didn't really know where it went. I just remember that this is a quoted episode, and that when you mention the Drumhead, people go, "Oh," it's one of those where people go, "Oh boy," Some really love it. In fact, our good friend, the Matt Boardman, said, "Oh, this is one of my favorite episodes." Jason Oken also just texted saying, "Oh, this is one of my very favorite episodes." So I think the free for all is going to be, it's going to be lit, man. We're going to have a pretty lit free for all. But
good.
I will say, here's the problem with me, being that I'm such a fussy Freddy. When the episode started, I was like, "Ugh, this is boring." And then it kind of started taking. First, it was like, "Oh, it's one of these mystery episodes," and then the mystery gets wrapped up in like 4.5 minutes or something, and then it becomes a courtroom drama episode, and then it becomes a morality play, and I guess that's good that they were able to weave so much into one episode. Like, it felt like almost like 2 or 3 episodes into one. There were no B plots because there was so much to cram into this. But yeah, I definitely thought of you because you like the mysteries. You being a big fan of the Twilight Zone and things like that. And courtroom dramas are not usually my thing, but I think you've got a better palate for those, right?
I do. I like the courtroom dramas. I grew up watching all those judge shows and
Judge Judy,
Judge Judy, the People's Court. I did. I watched Judge Judy, Judge Mathis, the brothers. Even Judge Joe Brown. But then also like some of those courtroom drama shows. The Law and Order type shows, the NYPD Blue investigation shows.
Oh man, I would rather die. Please continue.
Oh yeah. But this episode was about misdirection in a lot of ways because it starts with the misdirection a little bit with the Klingon, so you're not sure where that's going. That kind of leads you to this Romulan saboteur or some kind of group that's conspiring against the Federation on board the ship. That's the misdirection going over towards Simon Tarsas, another kind of misdirection play. Um, and even the admiral herself was a misdirection play, right? It's like, oh, she's on the side of good, she's on our side, and then it turns out that's not the case as well. So like, there's so many sleight of hand magic tricks in this episode. I thought it was well done. There weren't any giveaways about what was coming to be. I felt like I was guessing as the story was going along, so it wasn't like, oh yeah, I know what this is. This is going to easily be, the Klingons and this and that, and there's going to be some Romulan. It kept switching where the focal point was until the focal point actually landed on Picard's lap and his own flaws as a captain or misjudgment, if you may call it, whatever. But basically, where he is put on trial for his actions. And this episode had a little bit of everything. I thought it touched so many bases. I thought it was perfectly well written. So Jerry Taylor, rest in peace, did a phenomenal job with this script. It felt like it really wasn't missing much. I felt shades of Duet in the beginning.
Yeah.
Watching the interrogation with the Klingon. And there were some elements that were underpinning this episode that I feel like were really good topics that weren't delved into too much, but certainly were suggested. And
Yes.
yeah, so for me, the big thing that was suggested in this episode, which I thought they would get more into, was racism.
Exactly. From the beginning. And I just want to jump in here, and then I knew you would catch that, because I mean it was hinted at in a way to where we can pick. I mean, actually, I want to hear your take on it before I jump in on mine, which is probably way off.
I mean, there is no way off. It's how you perceive things and certain, you know what I mean? It's like, it hits notes for you emotionally. So one of the emotional notes that I felt was being played on in the beginning, in the opening scene with the Klingon under interrogation, this Lieutenant Jadon character. So it was mentioned that he was a Klingon exchange officer, right? So that's somebody who's on board the ship, probably on like some kind of diplomacy mission where it's like, hey, we're trying out each other's personnel on each other's ships to find out, how to be compatible and how to work together, as two different basically empires, right? So I feel like what he was alleging in the interrogation, the Klingon, was some kind of racism or some kind of discrimination against him because he was Klingon.
Yep.
And he was, feeling like he was being singled out or being, basically being identified as some kind of criminal because he was a Klingon. So that was one of the early claims right away for me. Like, okay. And I wanted to see a little bit more. Of course, there was the reference, like, well, Worf is a Klingon, so like.
That was my favorite line because, our chief of security is Klingon. That's impossible. It can't be racism. Is future speak for, I have a lot of black friends. What are you talking? Some of my best friends are gay.
Yeah.
It's the funniest. They're like, oh no, that's impossible. We have one on our entire ship. No, that's there's no way we have any prejudices against Klingons.
No prejudice. Yeah, exactly.
We got racism armor now.
Yeah, we're totally immune to that now, and which is crazy because we've seen elements of racism now in hindsight as I kind of look back on the series. The biggest element of racism towards the Klingon, towards Worf in particular, came, in my opinion, from Q. Q always had something really barbaric to say to Worf, something that always equated him to an animal or an unintelligent person. And so those kinds of tropes are the same kind of tropes that we see in other forms of bigotry and racism when people, dehumanize people.
Totally. Like he said, one was very funny, no offense, but he says, eat any good books lately? That's a funny line. But then he also recently, and I think Cupid said, oh, you'd make a nice throw rug. And I'm like, dude, he's just treating him like I mean, it's getting worse.
It's getting worse, and it's a form of bigotry, right? It's basically basing his entire identity on what is either the perceived by what Q perceives of Klingons and their cultures, or based on, it's not based on an individual interaction with him and his understanding of Worf. It's just based on these very general stereotypes. And I feel like Worf has actually been the victim of some form of racism or bigotry, or, words that would definitely qualify.
Totally.
So, so I thought they would get a little bit more into that. Even Worf himself having an opportunity maybe to speak up and defend his crew maybe would have been better than the opposite way. Like, hey, we got a black dude here. Like, he's cool. Like it didn't resonate as much to me, and it wasn't quelched enough for me in that opening scene by Worf. Worf could have easily have said, I've been treated with nothing but respect by, by the Federation,
right,
or something, some line like that, where he feels like he can justify that he has some kind of equity in the situation, where he feels respected, where he feels seen and recognized. I think that could have easily have been inserted in there, and it would have ended that debate. But then it went on.
But even then, it doesn't always, because
always.
I mean, just play devil's advocate. Just because one guy says, no, they've always been great to me,
right,
that doesn't mean that they're not saying in the back of their mind, well, this Klingon's one of the good ones,
right?
And then they still have in the back of their mind, additional stuff.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, you're right that that's not what the episode was necessarily about. That's what it looked like it was going into. And we're like, all right, here we go. Star Trek going to tackle some good stuff again, And then it kind of moves into it. Yeah.
It veered. And, the other aspect of that interrogation, I know we spent a lot of time on the opening scene, but that another aspect of that interrogation that I was reminded of in the Star Trek universe is the way the Jem'Hadar felt. There was a Jem'Hadar type feeling to, because the Jem'Hadar have also been the victims of these kinds of stereotypes, and basically they can't escape the destiny that they have to be these, the killers that they are, essentially, and their Ketracel white addiction. All of those things kind of lend credence to Jem'Hadar also being seen through this lens of bigotry.
Mm-hmm. Especially because the Jem'Hadar are being born unto this. They're saying, all right, this is where you go. This is where you belong. This is what you are. And so they grow up as these warriors. They grow up as these killers because that's what they've been put into. That's what's expected of them. And then if they want to try to think any differently, people are like, what are you talking about? You're a Jem'Hadar. This is, what you do. Yeah. This is what you are. Yeah. Great point.
Yeah. So, just to close it out on that subject, there was some curiosity from me on the fact that, well, who's this other Klingon dude? Like, because in my vision, right, of this show and of Star Trek, Worf is the only Federation guy representing the Klingons in the Federation, essentially. That was my understanding. Right. Now I see another Klingon. All of a sudden, we're 4 seasons in, and all of a sudden, there's another Klingon wearing wearing the insignia. So he has a comm badge on. So I'm thinking, I'd like to know a little bit more about this guy's backstory. Like, how did he make lieutenant? On what ship? Where? Like, how long was he serving? How long does this exchange program last? Who does he answer to in the Klingon Empire? Was he vouched for by Martok? Was he vouched for by, like a little bit more backstory?
It's a NAM for Martok right there. Yeah, because that's a good point. in a few other episodes, we've had this exchange program, but we've gotten to know the characters much more. Like when Riker goes over to the Klingons, and then that Klingon officer goes over. That's what the whole episode was about. We had Kalar, who was like a Federation ambassador. She was half Klingon. The whole episode was about her, basically. We had the Benzite, Mendon, Ensign Mendon, right? Whole episode included him where he's like, oh, all Benzites look the same, stuff like that. But this is the one guy, they're just kind of like, whatever, you get it. It's just it's a Klingon thing. It's a courtroom drama. We got to move on.
We got to move on. And so that was great. I mean, I love to see that Worf got a lot more to do. It felt like they finally getting some chances to use Worf's character in a way that seems like it helps the script, and he's not just saying yes or no. He's starting to get more activity and more traction, I see, in this fourth season. They're finding ways to utilize and use him better, in my opinion. And then this episode was a good example of that.
Okay, so then it becomes courtroom drama, or so we think, right? We think, oh, this episode's going to be about the trial of the Klingon. And that ended actually pretty quickly, right? It was like one or two scenes, and he's like, yes, I admit it. Yeah, I did this thing. No, but I didn't do that. And then, like Meatloaf, he's like, yeah, well, I would do anything for the Klingon Empire, but I won't do that. And what did you think of? Yeah, there it is. Rest in peace to him, I believe. So that's leftovers, I guess. I don't know where I'm going with that. The point is, what did you think of the courtroom drama aspect where they just say, all right, we're going to have an informal questioning or interrogation?
Okay, well, here's some things. A trial without a charge is what I was thinking. Okay,
good point.
I was thinking, well, he hasn't been charged with anything, but he's basically has an attorney representing him in Riker. This is now the second courtroom I basically drama part, and with the Simon Tarsus character. So I'm thinking, okay, well, this guy hasn't been charged with anything. It's all based on the suspicion of this Betazed, right? Or Betazoid, and a lot of things were going through my head. So another reason I like this episode is because anytime you get an opportunity to write for your captain in a way that the captain is upholding morality, has an ethical standard, and also puts his own ass on the line for his crew members, that to me uplifts your captain to the highest level of captain. It's a self-sacrifice thing. It's an integrity thing, and it makes your captain look like a real qualified and excellent leader. And so I think this episode did that for Picard. It made him, again, I think Measure of a Man also did that for Picard when he spoke up on the rights of Data, and he was also, adamant about this ethical morality standpoint. These are the things which make Picard an excellent captain, in my opinion. This is the writing for it. This is how you write for it. This is, anytime in the future of Star Trek episodes, if you want to write for your captain to make them look like the hero that they are on the show, this is how you make them look like a hero. It doesn't have to be a blaze of glory. It doesn't have to kill a whole fleet of Klingon ships. You actually have to show that you're willing to go out on the edge or put your own self on the line in order for, risk something in order to stand up for someone else's rights. And I think, or for what is right. So that's great writing for me. That's why I think Jerry Taylor knocked this out the park as well.
Yeah, a lot of reasons people like Captain Picard is because of these kinds of scenes and episodes. Yeah, he's more of like the diplomat. He's the guy that comes in and he brokers peace between two races, or he sits in the courtroom drama and he makes his speeches. And by the way, he dropped some bars at the end of this episode. We'll get into that. I mean, like, really, that's the elephant in the room. He dropped some bars. Those were some bangers at the end. I was like, oh my God. Like, it took me longer to finish this episode because I kept pausing and being like, I got to write that down. That is too good.
Me too. Another good sign of great writing.
Right.
When you find yourself writing what the writer wrote.
I know, and you can't
Like,
stop.
you
And
can't stop. You can't help it.
so that's what people like about him is the oration, the speeches, the morality, the diplomacy. That's what makes him different than other captains. We all know captains have their own corner of Star Trek lore. We know what Cisco is and where he sits. We know where Picard is now. Janeway, Kirk, Archer, all these people, they have different corners that they've forged for themselves into what kind of captain they are and what makes them special, what they do better than any other captain. And this is kind of Picard's, zone. This is his happy place and what makes him so good.
I think so. And an example of that is, again, back to this Beta Z that was, I don't remember the character's name, but who was essentially part of the staff.
Saban something.
Okay, Nick Saban.
I know, that's how I remembered it.
Okay, so yeah, Saban was being utilized in the way that we kind of been asking for Troy to be used. It's crazy because this was
Right.
interesting to me, right? We've been talking this whole time, like, how come they're not using Troy correctly? If she has these powers, wouldn't she be involved in these interrogations and decision making and whatnot? And so this admiral is actually using her Betazoid to that
Properly, basically.
Properly, essentially.
Right. Troy.
What we would think is properly. What we think is properly.
Right. We got Troy at the beginning there doing that with Riker and their little interrogation. She's like, he's hiding something, but I don't know what. This other guy was like, nope, he's this, he's this.
He's a liar.
Of course, he's full Betazoid and Troy's only half. So there's that too. But yeah, this is exactly.
Yes.
They almost didn't even need that character. However, we needed him to be part of, I don't want to call like the bad guy or the antagonist, but to kind of be on that side of the argument, whereas Troy would be much more measured in what she did. But it would have been nice to include her still.
Yeah, well, this gave me a little bit of insight onto why Captain Picard doesn't use Troy in that way. This is actually kinds of explains that in this episode when he mentions something like there's a difference between a counselor and an investigator.
Yep.
And he's making that distinction between how he utilizes Troy and how this other Betazoid Saban was being utilized. He's saying I have a counselor who's there to understand and inform me and not essentially incriminate or basically lay judgment on. Right. Troy suggests things. She's like, well, I don't trust him. He's hiding something. She makes suggestions, but she doesn't condemn a person. And I think that's one distinction you can see between her approach to her skill set, as a Betazoid. Is that she doesn't have that kind of judgment that she lays of condemnation. Right. And I think that's one of the things that was explained to me in this episode, what gave me a little bit of I wish it was done earlier, because then I could have felt like, okay, this is why Troy, they're going to underutilize Troy because they don't want her to be the vehicle by which they just make all these grandiose accusations and deduce things that are not necessarily deductible.
Yeah, and that is the big distinction in this episode, is coming to the truth or coming towards condemnation or persecution. Are you trying to find out the truth, or are you trying to find things to back up your own personal theory or your own personal goals or your own personal desires, or in the Admiral's case, her white whale kind of thing, where she was obsessed with just taking people down. But let's talk more about this on the other side. We got a lot to digest here. It's going to be good stuff. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule.